Leaves are turning brown under Canberra's blue sky. The budget's on its way. Jim Chalmers was up early, setting expectations for his fifth budget, due 3 weeks tomorrow, and easily the most challenging given the war in the Middle East and the worst energy shock in half a century.
The Australian economy is in lots of ways hostage to those developments.
A view no doubt galvanised after a visit to Washington, where he swapped notes with G20 counterparts.
If there's one prevailing vibe that comes from the international colleagues, it's really, I think, a sense of frustration about how long this war in the Middle East has been playing out.
In other words, a bleaker than usual backdrop, particularly for a government that says it wants to find savings to support households hurt by the fuel crisis and fix energy vulnerabilities exposed by the war. Jim Chalmers today made no bones about the fact that he and his colleagues have the National Disability Insurance Scheme in their sights.
It is easily the most important part of the savings package.
Launched in 2013 by the previous Labor government to make disability support more accessible and equitable, the scheme's expanded coverage and concerns about fraud have triggered rising calls for reform. Originally budgeted at an annual cost of $13 billion, the NDIS will this year need nearly $50 billion to operate, substantially more than Medicare or aged care.
Even the biggest supporters of the NDIS would acknowledge that the growth in spending on the NDIS is beyond what Australians can afford.
Twice as many people than were ever intended have entered the NDIS. The NDIS was established for those with permanent and significant disability. It wasn't established for everyone in Australia with a mild to moderate disability.
Governments on both sides have struggled with the program. Under his watch, Scott Morrison warned it was blowing out, but attempts at reform collapsed when Labor accused the coalition of manufacturing a crisis to justify cuts. Labor now faces the same accusations from the Greens and resistance from states and territories that are being asked to carry a greater share of the burden, particularly for children with low to moderate support needs.
These conversations can be difficult with the states and territories when there are big sums involved.
Labor in 2022 inherited a scheme expanding at more than 20% a year. That's since been halved to 10%, and the government wants to get it under 6% by 2030. Jim Chalmers will try to win over state and territory treasurers at a meeting tomorrow, and ahead of a major speech by Mark Butler on Wednesday.
Labor, as the founders of the scheme, have the opportunity to reshape it, and at this point in the political cycle, I'm urging the Prime Minister to cash in a bit of the political capital.
Martin Laverty was a founding director of the NDIS, serving on its national board from 2013 to 2021. He warns that curbing growth in the scheme and moving children to the proposed $4 billion Thriving Kids scheme will not be easy.
Thriving Kids and diverting under sevens to other service systems is not going to be enough.
Laverty wants the government to avoid indiscriminate cuts to services for people already on the scheme and instead focus on how it operates.
Imagine what Australians would say if 93% of providers claiming against Medicare were not registered. We've somehow allowed this extraordinary, invisible market to evolve.
If it can't manage spending on one of the government's fastest growing schemes, voters may question Labor's ability to manage long-term challenges.
The social licence of the scheme is now truly in question. Taxpayers did not sign up for the scheme that is now costing them twice, which they originally said yes to. If we don't save it now, that social licence risks declining further.